Friends, depending upon where you are, thanks for joining us today. This will be a slightly different post-flight conversation because it is pre-recorded. And while I'm used to doing stuff like this, I'm not so certain how this will work out. But I will try to be live in the chat, so please bear with me. And, if you enjoy content like this, let me know, because my next guest, somebody who's very, very special, who has a background I think is quite enviable in the creator community in the circles that I'm in, really does an awful lot in a lot of different places, including on the podcast of the Lotus Eaters and on his very own channel. We have a distinguished guest today. It is Beau the History Bro, and I tell you what, I'm going to bring him in and let him tell you what all he's involved in. Welcome to the show, Beau. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it, my friend.
No, thank you for having me. It's very flattered to be described as distinguished. Well, I'll take it.
Well, I think you are, and I love your opinions, and I love the content on your channel. Actually, you know what? Share with the audience what it is, then where you is on the regular, my friend.
All right. Well, sort of two things on the boil. There's one, my own channel called History Bro, where I just talk about history, because that's really my thing, my real love. My undergrad was in ancient history, so actually classical civilizations or the ancient world is really my first and foremost love. And quite a few. I've had this channel for 5 or 6 years. There's a few hundred hours worth of content, me talking about all sorts of things from the ancient world through to the medieval world, and even occasionally World War I and World War II. But after a few years of doing that, I had a few conversations with Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, and when he started his new platform, Lotus Eaters, the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, I was very kindly invited to come and join that crew, if you like. And so my day job now, and has been for best part of 3 years now, has been working at the Lotus Eaters, where, again, I make history-themed content, but it's behind the paywall there. If you are interested, go over there. It's £5 a month to subscribe to all the content behind the paywall. But there's also a lot of free content there, including the daily podcast. And I'm on that from time to time, or increasingly more so. I was on it today and yesterday, for example. And that's free. That's entirely free. So those two things, lotuseaters.com and History Bro.
And I will tell you that you will be very informed when you go to History Bro, the channel, because my goodness, some of your content is dense and informative, and I think a lot of people in my audience will benefit from that. And of course, your work on podcasts, The Lotus Eater, does not gone missed by me, and of course our friend Mr. H also has appeared there as well. So in fact, in the last few weeks, if you want to go look through the podcast, it's a pretty amazing performance there, and he even presented quite the subject when he was there as well. So I have to say thank you again for being here, and I am going to think that we are going to benefit from all you have to say today on today's weird stories and some oddities. But the first things first, we got to ask you the 3 questions. And of course, we jump over to the first question. Are you ready? This is easy. And of course, as always, folks, Beau is completely prepared for these. I've never let a guest down. I want to make sure they are ready to answer these, because I think it's informative, because you give a person an opportunity to think about it, and they really actually answer the question in the best possible way. So question number 1, Beau, is what's your favorite television program? What is the one that is the all-time favorite, that I always go and watch this show?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a bit of a difficult question. Like, what's your favourite song? What's your favourite movie? What's your favourite food? It's all the real answer. The honest to God real answer is it depends what mood you're in. Depends what phase you are in your life. So I could give you my answer, because I've had a little bit of time, not too long, only a few hours to sort of ponder this. And at different times in my life, I did have different answers. But I think my answer would have to be I, Claudius. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it. I'm not familiar with it, though. If you want to describe what that is, because again, you're dealing with American audience here as well. So.
Right. No, it's quite obscure and it's quite old. Oh, just one thing, Culture. I'm hearing a little click in my ear. Is that coming through? I hope that's not coming through.
I think you sound just fine.
Okay, good.
I
Okay.
think you sound just fine.
Just to mention, I nearly went with the answer Band of Brothers. I absolutely love Band of Brothers. I think it's a 10 out of 10 really for me. But I've only returned to it a dozen times. Whereas I Claudius, it's got a special place in my childhood, and I've rewatched it 20 times, more than 20 times maybe. I don't know. I return to it every 6 months, every year or so. Go back and rewatch it. So I
Wow.
Claudius. It is obscure and it is old and it is very British. It's older than me. It was first came out in 1976, so it's
wow.
older than me.
Wow.
And it's based on two novels by a chap called Robert Graves. Robert Graves was originally a World War One poet and classicist. Robert Graves lived to be very, very old himself. He actually fought in the trenches in World War One.
Wow.
And his sort of profession originally, maybe profession is not the right word, but his real love was, again, classics, ancient history. And so after the trenches in the 30s, he wrote two novels, one called I Claudius and the sequel called Claudius the God. And it wasn't until, and tried to make a movie out of it again in the 30s. But in 1976, the BBC, back when the BBC used to make good programming, created a mini series. Well, is it 10 episodes? I've watched it so many times I can't even remember how many episodes there are. I think it's 10. Anyway, a series called I Claudius, based on those two novels by Robert Graves. And it tells the story, really, of the first four emperors of Imperial Rome, the Julio-Claudian family, the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Now, spoiler alert, if any of your audience are really, really bored by history, because some people are really sort of bored by history, well, unfortunately, I'm going to bore you here. If this is up your alley, if this sort of thing does interest you, stay tuned. So the first four emperors, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, and Claudius. And it's told from the perspective of Claudius as a very, very old man, extremely close to death. And he's looking back over his life and a little bit of the portion of Roman history just before he was even born. And it tells the story. And for me, it was among the first things that sort of fired my imagination to be interested in ancient history, specifically Rome, specifically the era of 1st century BC, 1st century AD Rome, those first four emperors, the Julio-Claudian family. Because the story of Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, or Gaius, his real name's Gaius, and Claudius is an absolutely fascinating story. There's a reason why they're so famous, why emperors hundreds of years after them are largely forgotten. But why that Julio-Claudian family, and even the emperor that came directly after Claudius, Nero, they're so famous, they sort of tower over history in a way because they're endlessly fascinating. And Robert Graves, as a superb historian and classicist and storyteller, brought it to life in just a fantastic way. So I Claudius is my favourite television programme, I would say. I mean, I can go on and on about it for hours and hours. I mean, literally, I have done a little bit of content on Lotus Eaters once about I Claudius, and me and the person I was chatting to easily filled an hour and a half. So I don't know how much you want me to go on about it.
I just obviously, I mean, that's an intriguing show. It probably drama based, I would imagine, and historical in nature. Yeah. So that sounds fascinating. I would imagine there are people here in the States and obviously over there and in other places because we have lots of Australian members for the channel as well. But I think people might get a kick out of checking out something that they weren't familiar with. So that's an amazing, bring it to the table moment. So well done.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, just to set it a touch more, the main character Claudius is played by Derek Jacobi, one of the finest actors of the 20th century. Well, he's still alive. He's quite old now. Derek Jacobi plays the main character. Augustus is played by Brian Blessed. Again, an unbelievably great actor, Brian Blessed. A lot of people will be familiar with him. John Hurt plays Caligula, for example. And there's lots and lots of other extremely good performances. Now, it is quite low budget. Like I said, it's BBC. There's no massive battle scenes or anything. It's quite low budget. It's quite 70s as well. Most of the acting is they're theatre people, really.
Yeah.
So of the acting,
it's like watching a stage play that's televised. Yeah, very good.
Absolutely. Yeah. So some of the acting, some people might find it a bit hammy, and I suppose it is. but it works, at least for me. And the writing, both obviously the original Robert Graves novels and the screenplay, you're in the hands of masters, so both the writing and the acting is sort of brilliant. So again,
Wow.
let me know if you want me to say any more.
No, I think that's great, Bo. And again, it
Okay.
gives us an opportunity. And again, that this program was airing that you say is quite old. I was 6 years old, and
Right.
in the States here, we were enjoying British television. I can't tell you how many things that I've appreciated from British television over the years. And at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9 through into my teen years, I was watching things like Monty Python and so on and so forth. So, because that was broadcast here on our public broadcasting television stations. So I benefited. And it's one of the reasons why I love British humor and why I, get the sarcasm that you all tend to, flourish on. So, but anyway, dry British wit. But all right, well, we've got question number 1 down, so I think we can move to question 2. And for those of you watching again, please, if I'm putting comments up on the screen, if I'm able to be able to do this as a live premiere, which is my intention, please put your thoughts there as well, and also throw some thoughts at Beau, because hopefully he gets a chance to see this in its entirety when we play it. But we're moving on to the second question now, and this one's pretty straightforward. What's your comfort film, Beau? What's the film that you watch when you are ill or feeling sick, homesick? What when you need a pick me up? When the parasites that are showing up on your shores are taking it out of you.
Well, that's interesting. Again, I've only had a couple of hours to ponder that. The perfectly honest answer is I don't necessarily have one. I'm sort of fairly rarely ill and not usually away from home very often or for very long, so particularly get homesick. However, still, I understand the question, which is sort of
Yeah.
comfort film or your sort of go-to thing. So I was thinking about that, and I think, again, you've got more than one, sort of depends what mood you're in, doesn't it, really, and all that sort of thing. But nonetheless, I think the film I pick out is The Lion in Winter. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, this is wonderful. You're giving me new things to watch.
Well, anyone that watches that film and doesn't like it, you're not my sort of person.
Wow. Okay then.
That's a bit harsh. I don't quite mean it as harsh as that.
No,
But
I get
so
it.
it's for me.
Yeah.
It's so brilliant. Okay, what it is, it's very old again. It's from sort of 1968.
Yeah.
It was critically acclaimed at the time. I think it won some Oscars. It's based on a play by James Goldman. So it's again originally a play, and in fact, incidentally, the play didn't do all that well. But they made a film out of it. 1968. Peter O'Toole is the main character. Catherine Hepburn is the main female lead. It's also got Sir Anthony Hopkins in it as his first breakout role. Timothy Dalton is in it. So a great cast. The acting is absolutely superb. The writing, the script for it.
This sounds top tier. Is there any chance it went under a different name in the U.S.?
I wouldn't have thought so. No.
All right, I'll have
The
to look
Lion
it up.
in Winter. They did do a remake in about 2003, which I've denied. I saw a bit of it. I saw a few clips, and I just no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen because the original one is so perfect, and they got great people. They got like Glenn Close and Patrick Stewart in the remake, but it's still nowhere near good enough. And so what it is, it tells the story over one particular Christmas in the 12th century, the 1180s. It tells the story of Henry II, the king, the Angevin king, the Plantagenet king of England and vast swathes of France. And he's got 3 troublesome sons, one called Richard, one called Geoffrey, and one called John. Richard goes on to become Richard I, Richard the Lionheart, the Coeur de Lion. And the youngest one, John, goes on to be John I, King John. And his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, played by Catherine Hepburn. I think she got an Oscar, if I'm not mistaken. Superb performances, unbelievable acting. And it takes place over a short period of time, and Timothy Dalton is the King of France, and they're all scheming against each other. His sons and his wife and the King of France, they're all scheming against Peter O'Toole, the King Henry II. And they're sort of scheming against each other as well. And it's just it's just superb. There's many layers going on, and it's also that sort of thing where it touches on universal themes in the human condition, about hopes and fears and envy and jealousy and love and hate and all those sorts of things. So it's deep as well. And I just can't sing its praises enough. And again, every 6 months or year or so, I go back and I rewatch it. If ever I'm sort of true, if it's been a while since I last saw it and I'm sort of stuck for something to watch, that's often my go-to thing. I just don't really get tired of it.
I can't say much to this. It was an Academy Award winner. It is rather renowned, and I can't believe I've missed it or I've forgotten it. So I'm going to watch it and see which one it is because it sounds brilliant, and I love the political intrigue and that kind of storytelling, and it's one of the reasons why I get engaged in those types of stories, whether it be Billions or the Netflix did one, a political story with Kevin Spacey in it not that long ago, House of Cards.
House of Cards, yeah.
Yeah, and I love those kinds of things. So this is right in my wheelhouse. And so now I've got to go back and see if I saw this when I was a young person. There's a decent chance. I mean, believe me, I was made a film buff before I ever thought about going to film school. But anyway, I do appreciate that. That's incredible. So that's a good one to go back to too, because it sounds like it would be rather engaging for when you were trying to find that little lift in your day.
Again, for me, we had it on VHS when I was a child, growing up, and again, it sort of fired my imagination, my sort of historical imagination about what was it like in the 12th century? What was it actually like? How do these human stories? How must they have actually played out? Because just one example, Henry II, his queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine, led a rebellion against him, more than one, in fact. And so he ended up throwing her in prison for years and years. She actually outlived him and got out of prison. Now, what an incredible dynamic that you have to put your own queen in prison, but you don't execute her or anything. Now, and your own sons, grown-up sons, lead rebellions against you, yet you're on good enough terms to sort of still speak to them and have conversations with them. What must that have been like? Some historical dramas can bring that to life. And, well, The Lion in Winter is just a superb example of that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, and you can go and watch this on a lot of streaming services for free right now. And what I think is quite amazing, if you're looking for a little preview of it, you can check it out on YouTube. The trailer is up, so you can go and watch it there. So, thank you for that, Beau. Well, I guess we have one more question to get to, my friend, and this is the one that I like to wrap up with, because to me, sometimes it's not about the thing, it's about the place. So let's ask question number 3. Which is, what is your favorite film experience?
Right. Well, you mean the actual experience of going to the cinema?
Yeah. Or in our case here in the States, could be the drive-in, or or maybe sometimes for people it's somebody's backyard, or maybe their first love's home or whatnot. So, what was your favorite film experience?
Well, this one for me, when I spent just a few moments thinking about it, as soon as I remembered this particular memory, it was a no-brainer. It's like, oh, that's absolutely the answer to that for me. So it's going back into my childhood again. I think quite often things in your childhood are you have sort of a rosy tinted recollection of it.
Yes.
And when you're a child, it doesn't sound too depressing, but the world hasn't really stamped out your sense of awe and things. So when I looked up when this film was. I went to see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and that came out in 1989, and I was eight years old. So I was 8 years old, and we'd watched the other 2 Indiana Jones films. Again, we had them on VHS, taped off the telly, so they were a staple. We loved the Indiana Jones film, and the new one came out, and there'd been quite a few years had gone by since the last one. Obviously, I hadn't seen the other ones. I was too young or not even born or whatever it was when the first ones came out. But when The Last Crusade came out, it was 1989, and we were taken to the cinema in London. Now, I grew up in quite a poor household. We didn't really go hungry. We didn't really go without any shoes. but we're not too far off of that. So getting to go to the cinema was a real treat. Now, I also grew up on the very, very outskirts of London, probably about 20 odd miles from London is where I grew up. So again, getting a day trip out to London was very rare and a real treat. I'd never, to that point in my life, been taken to London to see a film in the evening. And anyway, we loved Indiana Jones so much, we was taken to the Empire Leicester Square in London. Now, you might not know, in London, Leicester Square is a bit of a theatre land in and around Leicester Square. In Leicester Square itself, there's a couple of, or three big cinemas. There's a big Showpiece Odeon, and then there's the Empire Leicester Square, which is, at least for Britain or London, it's sort of a very famous theatre, and it's massive. It's absolutely massive. I'd been in cinemas before, but never ever seen a screen like this. To an 8-year-old, it was like an IMAX or bigger. It seemed massive. It seemed gigantic, and the auditorium, all the seats, seemed like a stadium or something. It was absolutely fantastic. And I can sort of remember like the smells of popcorn and sort of the sticky floors, and just all sorts of great memories about, just the thrill of being in London in the evening time as well, and the film itself. I remember being absolutely riveted to the film itself, absolutely loving it.
Yeah.
I was just about old enough to sort of get who the Nazis were. I was certainly old enough to know who Sean Connery was.
Yeah.
And Indy, of course, everyone loves Indy. Yeah. And because if anyone out there doesn't know, Last Crusade was the last Indiana Jones film that was actually good, right?
Yeah. In fact, let me add, that was the best film.
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's rare, isn't it, when you can say the third in a franchise is the best one. It's very rare that you can say that. So yeah, that's my answer to that. Going to see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in 1989 at the Empire Leicester Square. Just brilliant memories for me.
It's funny because you mentioned that your experience with that. And again, I always tell everybody my very favorite film experience was also the biggest film I can recall in my mind, which was the first Star Wars film in 1977. Right. So I saw that in the theater, and the biggest screen that we had in the state I was in, there were only 6 of these screens in the entire country in the United States at the time. And it was basically this massive, I can't even describe it. It must have been 150 feet wide. It was ridiculous. And it had that sound, and all of the memories you just went through, I had at that film. And it's something about being younger. I mean, it's true. The world hasn't stamped you down or, beaten out the optimism in you or whatnot. Reality hasn't come marching to your door, but it's also, that was the film that inspired me to figure out how they did everything. I wanted to know how they did the practical effects and, what they were using to make these things and the models and how they filmed them upside down and all of that. That's what engaged me in filmmaking and the business of film and entertainment and so on and so forth, which expanded from there. So that experience, the smell of the popcorn and all of that, and this is something that you can actually speak to, I'm sure quite well. There are certain processes that spark memories, right? But the first ones almost always smell, for whatever reason, right? Smell, sound, taste. Those are activators for memory. That that in whatever moment in your life, that those are the things that vividly either rekindle a memory or are part of whatever a recollection is, I think. And I don't know. I mean, obviously you experience the same thing because you can remember all that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not having gone to the cinema many times before that in my life, so and definitely not a giant one in London. And
that's amazing.
And just everything about it, there were sort of lights that lit the way towards the actual going into cinema, and then the thing in there being like, it's like the ceilings were so high, it's like an aircraft hangar or something, and just a general, because nearly everyone there is really excited to see Indiana Jones, and so there was like an electricity in the air almost, or so it felt to me. God, I just don't know. It's just also there is that thing when you look back in hindsight.
Yeah.
You do sort of, it's funny what memories are. You actually you're actually re-remembering a memory, if that makes any sense. Where I've gone back to and recalled for myself what that was like. I'm actually remembering a memory of a memory, in a way, if that makes any sense. And so anyway, it gets sort of exaggerated. You can't help but it get exaggerated in your mind as being this great thing. And though it was, I remember being absolutely buzzing with excitement, like it was Christmas morning, sort of, like you can only get when you're 8 or 9 or 10.
Right.
And then nowadays, if you go to the cinema, because of course I've been to the cinema dozens or a few hundred times or whatever now. I've been back to the Empire a dozen times at least. So now I walk in there in my early 40s, and it's like, yeah, big deal. Yeah. Let's just get this over with. Like, I've got to worry about the trains. My mind's already ahead on getting like the annoyance of how to get home. But back then, when you're a kid, when things are still shiny and new, and just the wonder of it, yeah, and the smells. And people used to smoke back then.
That's
Everyone
right.
used to smoke everywhere. Everyone smoked all the time. You could smoke in the cinema.
Yeah.
People were smoking in the cinema.
Yep.
And the cigarette butts everywhere. It's mad. People that are younger than us forget that. But everyone smoked all the time. Anyway.
No, I think that's great, and and those are the things you recall, right? That's what's amazing about it. So when I ask this question, oftentimes it's the response to those moments when we were younger. So it's almost always that, or it's driven by, again, I mean, one of the answers, and again, I've done this many times now. This is in this particular format. This is the 28th time I think I've done this, and before this, I had a pre-show that was largely similar. I would have, guests on from time to time and talk about their experiences. But it's always when I ask a question like this, where it does bring back youth. It's that moment that a lot of people say light your fire, and sounds like that's what lit your fire in a lot of ways. So that's good to know. And yeah, as an adult, yeah, you're thinking about, okay, now I've got to figure out how to get back home. Now I've got to figure out, okay, and then, I got to cook dinner and whatnot. So I completely understand. But I do absolutely, I value that answer so much. So thanks for sharing with everybody. That was great.
Thank you.
But I guess we've got to move on to the next part of the show, which is some weird news, odd stories, I would say, and it's purposefully done this time because I want your feedback on some stuff that I find bonkers sauce. So we'll get into that. Here we go, on to odd stories. And once again, folks, if you're watching this is a pre-recorded version of your normal program that's live, but I will try to be participant. If I'm not in the audience now, I will be in your comments after your viewing. So thank you very much. And on we go. And on we go. So here we are with weird stories. Now, again, as I said just a moment ago, as a preamble, I picked these out specifically for you because I thought they would be kind of fun to discuss because you guys do some bonkers stuff. And there's one thing that caught me off guard this week that I covered in one of my morning programs that I just absolutely had to ask you about because I think it's crazy. And Al Humphreys and many of the other people who watch me in the UK and elsewhere are like, oh, no, this is like something we do. I'm going to ask you. What the heck is this? Chasing cheese wheels or lugging sacks of wool, UK competitors embrace quirky extreme races. What is this? What is this? Do you actually do this? Do you do this? This is a story from the AP. It came out a little while ago now to our viewers on May 27th. And is this a thing? Do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's only one place in England that does it. It's
Okay.
in Gloucestershire, which is not too far from me. I'm in Wiltshire.
Okay.
Gloucestershire's it's only a few miles away, really. So it's only this one particular place. It's one particular hill in Gloucestershire, but they do it every year. It's once a year, and yeah, they definitely do it. I've never taken part. You sort of are going to get injured if you really go for it. The wool carrying thing. There's also usually these are sort of small rural communities, And
So
it's just their idiosyncratic thing. It's not like everyone does it all over Britain. It'll be like one village that does
So
it.
yeah. Okay, I was going to ask, is it village specific? And that would make a lot of sense because I mean there are traditions in different boroughs in New York and in different parts of Southern California. They do different things, and a lot of these were also based around the agrarian cycles and whatever the region it was known for, right? Because in some places it's like a particular gourd or pumpkin or whatnot. So they have pumpkin festivals and such. So I was wondering if that was what this was, but what blew my mind is that the cheese rolling thing. Now, this is really chew, right? And the wheels are what, double Gloucester? Gloucester. So see, people try to get me to say things the right way, and I cannot do it. Double Gloucester. I hopefully said it close enough that time.
Yeah.
Cheese. So that must be a type of cheese. Double Gloucester. Gloucester.
Yeah.
Gloucester.
So it's like a local cheese.
Okay.
Gloucestershire.
Right.
Gloucestershire.
And then they roll it down. They roll it down the hill, and the winner of this prize after the 200-yard or 180-meter hill is that if you win, you get to keep the cheese.
Pretty decent prize.
Sure, but I mean, isn't it a little dirty at that point? Like muddy, rainy,
Oh.
all that? I mean, they say that. This year's hill was especially slippery and muddy because of rain.
Yeah, it will be covered in mud, but it's a wheel of cheese though, so it's got like a waxen.
Oh, it has
steel
okay,
on
so
it.
it is. So
you know,
it's
like
wax,
a big wheel of
wax
cheese. It'd be
covered.
really big. It's like this big,
All right,
and it's covered in a protective kind of waxeny shell. But yeah, I mean, the actual getting to keep the wheel of cheese is it's not really about that. What it's about really is a community coming together and being a bit silly and having fun and doing something a bit dangerous because people always get injured. I'm not sure if anyone's actually died. I don't think anyone's died, but maybe they have. Certainly people get injured, like quite badly injured, loads, like broken legs, arms, the odd broken back and things. Because if you want to try and win, you basically throw yourself down this hill. And it's a really steep hill. I don't know if you've ever seen footage of it. But the people that do it, they throw themselves down this hill.
It looks bonkers. So yeah I can completely get it. And it does look like they are going for a bit of a slide. Imagine, the grass stains in your pants at this point. But honestly, I mean, apparently one of the winners of the 3 races was a person from Germany. So what are you guys doing to keep out these foreigners from these cheese races? No, I'm just kidding.
No, so like there's certain things, aren't there, all over the world where it kind of is weirdly dangerous. You know, like the running with the bulls in Pamplona in Spain.
Yeah.
It's like madly, or like the Isle of Man TT racing. I know it's a bit different, but it's like people die in the Isle of Man nearly every year. Sometimes multiple people every year, and it's kind of something left over from the age before health and safety. It's left, it's left over from the age where people were absolutely prepared to seriously injure themselves, perhaps die, for no other reason than it's a bit of a laugh.
For glory, absolutely. Look at these people. I thought this was lovely. I wanted to cover it. I thought your perspective would be good.
One last thing to mention is that those pictures don't really do it justice. That hill is insanely steep.
Oh, wow.
It's honestly like a silly gradient, like that or something. It's really, really, really steep. Anyway,
look at this. This is the woolsack carrying. I love this, and again, I mean, these traditions. I hope we never lose them, despite the health and safety risks. Gosh darn it, y'all! Buzz kill. Don't take away the. I want to look at this hill one more time because it is. You're correct. This is crazy. There it is. That's a longer shot.
It's so steep. You sort of can't really walk down it. You would, with the best will in the world, you can't really walk down it. You would always kind of stumble and fall and go head over heels down it. So
it looks uncomfortable to stand on. I'm looking at the crowd here on the side. I'm like, that doesn't look like. It looks like anyway. I thought that was bonkers. So. I thought I'd get to that one first. But next, I want to talk to you about some history related weird story. And maybe you can speak to this because I cannot. If you like ancient civilizations, which I think you do, you talked about it at the beginning of the stream. Tell me a bit about if you know anything about these Mexican mummies. Apparently, the Mexican government says the arm of a 19th century mummy came off after mishandling by museum staff.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, this happened in Guanajuato, Mexico, or at least that's where they were stored during the course of that picture, I guess. But yeah, the Guanajuato of mistreating one of the country's mummified 18th century body. So Mexico's federal archaeology agency is going after them in a way. The National
Hmm.
Institute of Anthropology and History (INAH) said that during recent renovations at the museum, where the mummified bodies are on permanent display, the arm of one of the mummies, well, came off. One might think the complaint is all about the dignified treatment of the corpses that were buried in the early 1800s and dug up starting in the 1860s because their families could no longer pay burial fees. That's wild. So
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
a traditional mummy, I guess. But in
Hmm.
fact, the mummies have been on somewhat grisly display in glass cases, um, uh, and touted around to tourism fairs for decades. Some were exhibited in the U.S. and as well recently as 2009, apparently. What appears to be the root is the latest of the latest dispute is a turf battle between the INAH, which believes it has jurisdiction over the mummies, because it says they are uh, national patrimony, and Yanawanto, which considers them a tourist attraction. So that's strange, but I guess they're at odds with each other. Do you know anything or have heard anything about these mummies, or what would
Hmm.
happen in the UK if something like this happened?
Okay, so first of all, I'd say I've not heard about this story. You gave me a heads up on the earlier questions,
Yeah.
but these things I've
Oh
I've
no, no,
had no.
no. Oh yeah, you're totally unprepared for this.
Right,
Yeah.
so I've never heard of these 19th century Mexican
Yeah.
mummies, but I
Yeah.
can talk about mummification
Yeah.
again for a few hours. Actually,
Oh.
if you ever went, so I know quite a lot about it. So first thing to say is 19th century is not ancient. It's not very long ago at all. That in fact to call them mummies would be probably a bit of a misnomer. I mean, they do look petrified and mummified, but so famously the ancient Egyptian culture it did mummification, but there's
Right.
all sorts of cultures all throughout history that go to lengths to preserve or mummify dead bodies.
Yeah.
In the British Museum in London, my Mecca, my cathedral is the British Museum, one of the
Right.
greatest repositories of ancient artifacts in the world. An Egyptian gallery there, and there's all sorts of genuine, legitimate ancient Egyptian mummies there in various states behind glass cases, and you can see them. And again, got a few cherished childhood memories of going to the British Museum, and have sort of literally studied there at one point at uni, and a couple of other things. So I am familiar with mummies. Now, the nature of mummification at its very essence, boiled down to its simplest form, is removing the moisture from a body. That's what it's about. And I do know that Mesoamerican, i.e., Central American and South American cultures, all sorts of them, were interested in mummification. Sometimes just the head. Sometimes you decapitate a corpse, get rid of the body. Sometimes deliberately let animals eat them, or let expose them to the elements until they're all gone. But the head you keep, the head you mummify. That's something that's done in a few different cultures, particularly in South America. But in Mexico, now Mexico, I am interested in Mexico and Mexican history and Central American, Mesoamerican history, going back for centuries, going back to the age of Sir Francis Drake and all that sort of thing. In their culture, to this day, it's quite macabre. Even their version of Christianity, even their version of Catholicism, focuses quite heavily on the death of Christ and the body of Christ and the torture, the passion of Christ. In Mexico, a lot of the cartels love the skull theme, the skull motif. Um, in Mexican culture, it's just part of their culture. Death and skeletons and mummies and life after death and all that sort of thing. So no wonder if they've got their own, even if they are merely 19th century mummies, because some of the oldest ones at the British Museum from ancient Egypt are 2000 BC. So to have mummies in inverted commas from the 19th century Uh, well, if that's one of their things that they put on as a spectacle or a local of local interest, then I can understand why it all makes perfect sense. Now, handling them, anybody. Oh, sorry. Do you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say these were because got grabbed further in the story. These were
Yeah.
unintentionally mummified because
Right,
of
left
where
out
they
in the
were.
desert or something.
Yeah, they were
Just to stay
buried
there.
in mineral-rich soil in a very dry crypt. So,
Right.
and it's in a mining state. So I would imagine they were unintentionally mummified as described here, not like we would find in the Mesoamerican cultures that you were talking about, which you would normally find in like the Yucatan Peninsula and in places like that where you had a lot of those temple pyramid building
All right.
sects, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah, the Aztecs and things.
Mhm. Mayans
Well,
and such.
there's
Yeah.
there's other ways to preserve bodies. If you're sort of frozen in ice or permafrost or something,
Right.
there's bodies from the Alps in Europe that are thousands and thousands of years old
Wow.
that have been found once they've been thawed out. Also, if a body falls into a peat bog, a body can
peat.
be.
Yeah, peat is great at absorbing moisture and retaining it and all of that. Yeah, in fact, it's a gardening item that I use regularly, so I'm very familiar with peat moss. So, yeah.
And it also stops bacteria from growing. If you're packed in just so in a peat bog, it prevents
Wow.
all bacteria. So you're sort of in stasis. The body sort of just stays there again for hundreds or even a few thousand years.
Wow.
Again, in the British Museum, there's a body there from sort of the Anglo-Saxon times, well over 1,000 years old. And when it was found in the 20th century, it was, very, very, very well preserved to the point where you can still clearly see what he was like, and we know what his last meal was. It was still sitting there in his stomach, preserved, and all sorts of things. Yeah, yeah. But as for just being very, very dry, left out in a desert, there's a lot of examples from the Atacama Desert. But if you're just being left out in an extremely arid and dry conditions where bacteria can't really get to you, and you're not really eaten by worms, or you're not sort of eaten by bacteria,
Right.
then yeah. Now, as for so the nature of a mummy is that it's brittle. That is
Right.
the nature of all mummified things. The Egyptians didn't just mummify people; they mummified all sorts of animals. They like to mummify their cats. They had pet cats often.
Right.
Ancient Egyptians, they'd mummify their cats. And anyway, it's going to be an extremely brittle thing.
Right.
So someone obviously just maybe didn't realise how brittle it was, and when they went to move it,
A little careless.
it's just like snap, the arm came off, and they were probably mortified. I'm sure that whoever did it, they were absolutely mortified, and
Right.
extremely embarrassed. But
Huh.
that's the nature. If you're ever going to move a mummy, anyone out there that's thinking about moving a mummy,
Yeah, because that's a daily occurrence.
just be aware, it's very brittle.
Oh, well, I just thought it would be kind of fun to cover, and despite the fact that you were unprepared for that, you brought a lot to the table. So I was just going to say, this is bonkers, and then I was going to compliment you and the British government on taking very good care of ancient treasures. None of this would ever happen under your custody. I'm often fascinated with just how well your museum preserves everything. It's incredible.
No, one of the premier museums in the world is the British Museum. In all sorts of ways, the English or the British invented. It's not really the right word, but pioneered, let's say,
Yes.
modern archaeology.
Yes.
The way we do archaeology these days is not all that old. It's from the Victorian period. Again, from the 19th century. If you go back to the early 19th century or the 18th century or before, people went around the world just blowing things up to see what was underneath and stuff, and had no proper concept of preserving things carefully and using a tiny little brush or a toothbrush to very, very delicately do archaeology or anything like that. So all that sort of thing was pioneered really by us, and now it's the norm.
It's the practice, yeah. And again, this is a great conversation to have after we just talked about Indiana Jones, right? And the preservation of artifacts. So, well done today. All right, and finally, I have one last story to get to of the weird stories. This one will be fun, I think, Beau, because I'm going to ask you: do y'all have bears that just wander about and steal things?
We absolutely do not have any bears.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
No.
you have no bears in the UK at all?
No, no.
See, and I'd heard that. Somebody had mentioned that to me once, and I wanted to double check for two reasons. Because this in California just happened. Now that we're watching this, this is obviously a week after we've recorded it, but this just happened. So like a week ago now, for those of you watching live. So this was in Monrovia, California, and this bear literally has a nickname of Oreo because his favorite thing to steal from people is Oreos, and it just happened again. So just a real quick bit from this story I'll read. The bear breaks into California home to steal Oreos. So he's causing a bit of concern for the neighbors. Obviously, it's a big bear, right? But he broke into a home on Canyon Crest Drive on Friday last and left with a pack of Oreos. So he just got into the house, threw and opened a window, and left carrying the yumminess. And, they talk about how comfortable the bear is around all of the people and everything else. And of course, there are many bears. California has just tons and tons of bears. But this isn't the first time. I mean, a smaller bear broke into a neighbor's car to get some Oreos not that long ago. Could have been him, could have been Oreo. But the black bear is the sole living bear species in the state, and they live everywhere. I mean, they live in residential areas. They just kind of find places to stash themselves away. And obviously, natural areas and rural areas. But they've been mistaken for grizzlies because they have various colors of fur. They can have blonde or cinnamon color as well as black. Yeah, they've been sighting them there since 1924. But this bear is the one that stole the Oreos, but it's not the only one, right? I mean, this is the car where, the guy was observing the bear nicknamed Oreo swiping Oreos from their car. So it's bonkers, right? Could you imagine what would happen in the UK if something like this was occurring? Do you have any like rambunctious animals like that, wild, that do stuff like that?
Not really. So, you think it's crazy bonkers that we throw ourselves down a hill to win a cheese.
Sure.
We think it's crazy in North America and Canada that bears are a thing. Okay, yeah. So in Britain, there's basically no big predators at all, with one exception. I'll tell you that right at the end. So we used to have bears,
right?
A long time ago. I'm talking centuries and centuries ago. Right. We used to have wolves, again, centuries and centuries ago, but it hasn't been for centuries that we've had any large predators. So literally the worst thing, we don't really have any real poisonous snakes, with perhaps the exception of an adder, which isn't even that bad. No real poisonous snakes, no real big poisonous spiders or insects. The biggest predator, well, it's not even a predator, the biggest sort of wild animal that might remotely be dangerous to us, and I'm not joking because this will sound so lame, is a badger.
I know what badgers are. We here in the States, we have things called honey badgers. Those are they're violently like terrifying to people.
No, a honey badger is a worry. No, we've got normal badgers that are sort of largely scared of people and keep themselves to themselves and will almost certainly run away. They could give you a nasty bite.
Yeah.
Or a fox, just a normal fox. That's honestly the worst thing you'll get in Britain. So, and also we haven't got any volcanoes and we're not over any earthquake zones. So, so Britain is actually, in terms of natural things, is very, very safe. Right?
It sounds like it. I just thought you'd get a kick out of this bear because it's not every day. So
we look at North America. Britain's sort of laugh a bit at both Australians, because everyone knows that Australia is filled with dangerous animals and insects and things.
Everything there's trying to kill you.
And Americans, you've got to worry about like a bear, or in some places up in Vancouver, whatever, it might be an actual grizzly or something. Mm-hmm. Or in California, big cats. Yeah. Right? There might actually be mountain cats. Like we look at that and we think, that's mad. How do you live? How do you?
Well, I'm in the desert Southwest, and we have bobcats and mountain lions and
lions.
And we have all kinds of venomous, poisonous snakes, and we have rattlesnakes are like something that we find everywhere. And then. But in the stage you're just used to it, it's like, all right, well,
right?
Well, I think the other thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're spread out in a way that I don't think a lot of other countries are. I mean, if you look at the density of populations, I mean, there's hundreds of miles between cities, you know. I mean, for me to get to, locations about my state, I mean, there are times when I've got to go several hundred miles to get to, my destination. So it's pretty wild. But
Yeah, there is one exception in Britain, and it's not even really a proper thing. So down in the south, the extreme southwest, much even further southwest than where I live, down in Exmoor or well, I won't bore you with the names, but
sure.
um, even in the down in the southwest, there's been tales told for quite a while that there are big cats down there, or at least one big cat, the Beast of Bodmin. Now, some people say it's not even true, it's not even real, but there is some evidence that there may be something like a wild jaguar down there, or a very small amount, maybe half a dozen or something, of
Right.
large cats that live wild down in Bodmin, down in, what is it, near like Exeter or Devon or Cornwall Way. So, because we've got some open countryside there, moors, and there
Right.
may be the Beast of Bodmin down there, but it's not
Hmm.
even completely 100% true. Like, no one's properly taken a picture of it, or no one's ever really found a dead body of one, and they say, oh yeah, there was one at least. So it's sort of, so really
So
properly documented, the worst you will ever come across is a badger
is
or
a
a fox.
badger or fox. Well,
Yeah.
foxes, and we're crazy here. We have people who take them as pets. So,
Oh no, you
it
don't
is,
do that.
it's very, well, hey, you got some crazy people here. And a lot of Florida people are nuts. But all right, I'm sure you've heard about Florida.
Yeah, yeah. I
Anyway,
love I love the look of foxes. I'd love to have a fox as a pet, and I even looked into it, but they said no, they're sort of feral.
yeah,
They will go to the toilet everywhere in your home if
yeah,
you do that. They will mark everything everywhere,
yeah.
and they can't really be tamed properly.
They also have
Um,
a bit of rabies problems
oh
too.
yeah, yeah.
But all right, well,
All right.
we'll jump out of this. I'm glad you entertained and indulged me with these fun stories, because to me they're wild and odd, and I wanted to get the one in the UK first because I thought that was odd. But on that note, we are going to move on to actually today's topics. And I wanted to talk about two broad subjects. One of them is kind of involved in politics, and the other one isn't. So let's move on, if you would indulge me. Audience, again, this is a pre recorded version of today's Friday post flight. I will be attempting to be live in the audience right now. If I am not, please leave me a comment, and I think I should be able to respond to you expediently. So we'll move on, and we're going to check out today's topics. Right, and as we move on to the news stories of the day, understand these are a week old, or at least they refer to some things that we'll talk about in a broader sense. But here in the United States, we keep a close eye on things that are happening in various parts of Asia, and I think the UK does as well, because we're partners when it comes to defending the sea and doing some other things together to make the world a safer place. So something odd happened not that long ago, a week ago, for those of you out there now, that I thought was kind of a telling sign of some issues that are going on in Asia specifically. And when you look here, North Korea has sent over about 200 balloons carrying trash to South Korea, and think that's a little bit odd, but perhaps it's part of a broader, not just message, but something that I think could be a stealth way of making this a normalized thing so that they could do something more heinous in the future. I don't know. I'm getting uncomfortable with balloons flying things over, places they would consider enemies. What do you think, Bo? Because I can't even begin to analyze this.
So this is new to me, but is it just normal rubbish, normal trash? It's just normal household trash, is it?
Yeah, so far, and again, this is a video, so it's not really. I'm not
Okay.
really able to show it
So
because I'll get claimed. But no, they flew hundreds of trash carrying balloons, And so far, the military is clearing it. You can't see it in the video now, but the military is actually clearing it out. They mobilized their entire military, especially the chemical and explosive teams, to recover the objects and the debris. It's a very, they call it a bizarre provocation. I call it a problem because I think this is a very strange overture, perhaps, that, if this becomes regular and they normalize it, it could be a problem in the future. Imagine if they did this with like waste items that were dangerous.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I know nothing about this particular story. It's new to me this minute.
Yeah.
But what I can do is talk about Korea again for hours. Happily talk about Korea for hours and hours and hours. Fascinating to me. I've been interested in Korea or the Korean Peninsula for a long, long time. Not just the 20th century, not just Kim Il Sung and Kim Jong Il and his son Kim Jong Un. Not just that, but the whole history of Korea. So this is what I would say. This is my take, and I don't mean this to be needlessly xenophobic or racist, but particularly the North Koreans are a pack of weirdos. They suffer from a type of collective weirdness. And again, try and let me explain. I'm not saying that just to be provocative or just to be mean or harsh.
Sure.
Okay, so Korea, for a lot of its history, was known as a bit like Japan, as a bit of a hermit state. They take their own identity, and I'm talking about both North and South Koreans, because of course they've only been, North and South Korea has only been divided since the mid 20th century. They've always been sort of very, very fiercely their own people. They've got a very, 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 very strong sense of their own identity. And we're the Koreans, and everyone else is other. The Japanese were always like that, or very much like it still today. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Extreme, well, you'd call it ethno-nationalism, really. Okay, so they were like a hermit state. And for centuries and centuries, like Japan, you weren't invited to come to Korea. You're not a Korean, so there's no place for you in our land. You're not supposed to be here. This is our land. This is the land of the Koreans. We're Korean. You're a foreigner. Get out. Okay, now, that's what they were like for centuries and centuries. Now, when you've got the example of when the Japanese invaded them just before World War II, our version of World War II during the late 30s and the early 40s, when Japan was finally beaten in World War II and the Japanese left, the Korean and the Cold War began almost immediately. You had in the North the Soviets trying to, the idea of the domino effect isn't complete insane. It's not a completely insane made up thing by Eisenhower and Nixon. It was a real thing, the real concept, that the domino effect, that these countries fall like dominoes to communism. So where China had gone communist in 48, isn't it? Chinese go red in 1948, and the Soviets think that they can turn Korea to be communist, and so they try it with Kim Il Sung. Now, Kim Il Sung, I hope I'm not assassinated by the North Korean state for saying this. Kim Il Sung was a weirdo. He was a freak, and his son Kim Jong Il even more so. Just a little bit, to our mind, a little bit mad. Really, had all sorts of weird ideas, all sorts of weird, freakish ideas about what to do and how to run their country, and that they would rather their people starve to death than lose face, and make up stories that the Americans deliberately tried to massacre them all and stuff. Because there was the Korean War in the 50s. You ever seen MASH? Did you ever watch MASH? I used to love MASH.
Yeah, one of my favorite programs. Yeah,
love MASH.
Yeah.
So I won't go into that. But
the show went on 3 times as long as the war. So
yeah, right. Yeah. So a lot of American boys and Britain fought alongside you in the Korean War. So the Korean War was actually quite a brutal war. And so anyway, we ended up with the partition of Korea and South Korea, where the Americans really, like Japan, tried to make sure that it had a modern economy, modern industry, and it's like a showpiece for capitalism. Let's make Japan and South Korea a model of progress, and will make them rich. And they did, a great success. Whereas the Soviets, or Kim Il-sung and then Kim Jong-il's version of communism, turned North Korea into a type of living hell, where there was periodically unbelievable famines, unbelievable repression, secret police, where you're not allowed, even to this day, the Kim Jong-un, you're only allowed to wear certain types of clothes.
Wow.
There's only a few types of haircuts that people are allowed. Things like that. Mad 20th century repression. And so the idea that now they're sending over balloons with just random trash in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, that's just one more thing in an endless list of insane nonsense that the North Korean communists do. What's going through the mind of their senior leadership that they're going to do this? Who knows? Who knows? They're mad freaks. There's no rhyme nor reason to it. Who knows what they're doing?
Well, I mean, this is garbage and feces and other things.
Yeah.
Not spectacular, not kind.
That's that's like something that would come out of the mind of a disturbed 11-year-old, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look at these
Right?
balloons. Look at these translucent balloons holding this trash bag here. This is wild.
The North Korean leadership to this day, I've just come up with this, are like a disturbed 11-year-old. that's what they're like. That's how they behave.
Oh, this is wild. But yeah, they also had some propaganda leaflets mixed with it. So maybe they didn't think very highly
Sure,
of their
why not?
propaganda. I don't know.
Why not?
I thought you would appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's wild.
It's funny. I could regale you with endless stories of what particularly Kim Jong-il did in like the 70s and 80s and stuff. Just weird thing. It's just like, for example, one little thing. He decided that he really liked a particular Japanese director, so he just kidnapped him and brought him over to North Korea and just made him under duress start making films for him.
Wow.
Just like stuff like that. Just really sort of inhuman, weird, tyrant stuff. And the current leader, Kim Jong-un, seems to be cut from the same cloth. Like he will execute someone by having them ripped apart by dogs.
Well, didn't he eliminate all of his other siblings except for his sister?
He definitely had his elder brother murdered in a weird way at an airport. Yeah.
Odd.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to jump to the next story because I thought, maybe, just maybe, you could explain this to me. Now, this comes from Breitbart here, which is a little controversial here in the States because, it tends to lean a bit harder right than most other publications. But it says Nolte, and John Nolte's a great writer, but Mad Max with sexless girl boss drives Memorial Day box office to 26-year low. I'm not certain this characterization is accurate, but it's going to start a conversation between you and I because the publication The Hill fired this off at us, that Hollywood suffers a rough holiday weekend at the box office. Now, this is, again, a week ago, and we've probably talked about this subject a few times between now and when you're seeing this, but I think this indicates Hollywood's got a bigger problem. In fact, there's a video out on my channel now about that. I think Hollywood may have lost the audience entirely.
Yeah, Hollywood. Again, another, broadly speaking, because it's not everyone that's in that quite large industry of Hollywood. So I'm not,
Right.
I don't want to tar every single person connected to Hollywood with what I'm about to say. But again, broadly speaking, another pack of weirdos into all sorts of weird stuff. They've been exposed many times to be into nefarious things.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we all know what we're talking about. Just like it was John Nolte said that.
Yeah.
Not Nick Nolte.
Not Nick Nolte. No, John Nolte's a prolific columnist, and he writes great editorials for Breitbart.
I just wanted to reference Nick Nolte there.
No, I know, me too. Every time I can, because he's bonkers sauce. So I hear you.
This thing of crowbarring in sexless girl bosses into films. It's like, are you trying to tank your own industry? even real life sexist girl bosses don't want to see endless films with sexist girl bosses. And most people, a lot of people, one of the biggest audience to go to see films, certainly action films, will be men.
Yes.
And we haven't got an endless appetite for sexist girl bosses. We don't want to see it. And the other thing is, I mentioned it on Mr. H Reviews the other day, but I'll say it again. A lot of people are sick with the character or the stereotype that that a small, weak woman who's got no arms and no shoulders is exceptionally strong and can beat up loads of men.
Right.
It's like, it's just, it's sort of beyond annoying. It's just like, most blokes, most men have been in a fight. They've certainly seen lots of fights. They've watched loads of boxing and MMA.
Right.
You know that speed and aggression and weight is what matters. Yeah. So no, you can't have a 5'3", 90-pound woman with tiny little shoulders and toothpick arms beating up a big bloke. It doesn't happen. So stop showing us it.
Yeah, and I will say this to the credit of this particular film, Furiosa, which we're talking about now. Despite its very poor performance of $26 million in the first 3 days, and its total performance of $32 million over the 4-day holiday weekend here in the States, these are domestic numbers. And a film that cost $168 million as a reported budget, mind you, that's not really. I mean, this thing didn't even make $60 million over the holiday weekend.
Oh, so they'll lose money.
Oh, indeed. Right. Yeah. So, but when you look at that in that context, to its credit, this film did not show her being overpowered, because throwing around a 285-pound Chris Hemsworth just wasn't going to happen. Because she's about she's a stick figure, dude. I mean, she's not big. So, and I know you know this, but it didn't do well. And I predicted before the film released it was going to flop, because it's a niche film. It's focusing on a character that I don't know that there was demand for. But I think this is a bigger problem.
Sorry, Culture. I've just had something pop up on my screen saying there is no free space left for recording. Local recording is being cancelled.
Oh, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Are you sure it's all right? That's not going to ruin anything.
No.
Okay. Fine. All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I'm, like I said, I'm looking right now at a bigger problem, my friend. The audience is checked out, and it doesn't matter for what movie. Because I saw a pretty decent film called The Fall Guy. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had Mr. Ryan Gosling in it, and a chick that people find attractive that's also British. So whatever. What's her name? Emily Blunt or whatnot?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And so, and again, she's cutish, but whatever. But anyway, so the two of them were brilliant together. If you're familiar with the film Romancing the Stone or Jewel of the Nile, with Kathleen Turner and one of the
Michael Douglas, was it?
Yeah, well, exactly. One of the stars of the time, Michael Douglas, who had a career right then that was just enviable. I'm just to die for. He just was in so many different great films all in a row. But anyway, and it showed that's what this film was. The Fall Guy movie was a rom-com in that style, with some adventure and lots of stunts. I mean, the practical effects and the practical use of set pieces and all that were brilliantly done. And it failed, and it shouldn't have. You had two lovable people, and it failed so fast. And I've got another video on this on the channel that just would have come out just this last week. But it failed so quickly. It went from here domestically in our theaters. 17 days later, it was on streaming.
Wow. Okay.
So they didn't even bother to keep it like exclusive to theaters because it was performing so poorly, but it's been film after film after film that's been failing. I don't know. Is that the similar experience you've seen in the UK?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just to say, I saw the trailer I went to cinema. Last time I went to cinema was only about 3 weeks ago or so, maybe a month ago. And I saw a trailer for The Fall Guy. Yeah. And I did think, it's not going to change my world, but it looks like an all right movie. It looks like something that's not too bad. If it was on TV, I'd sit down and watch it. It didn't look too bad. So to see that it has completely flopped is a bit weird. But yeah, there's lots and lots of cinemas in Britain that are just closed down, and for quite a while now, maybe 10 or 15 years. Over the last 10 or 15 years, loads and loads of cinemas have physically closed, never to open again. I think you're right. I think we're moving towards a much more post-cinema world. I think I might be wrong, but I think there will always be a place for the cinema, but it will just be extremely niche. It will just be an extremely niche thing. There won't be very many of them anymore. Like so back in, you must have spoken to sort of your parents' generation, or even your grandparents' generation. Back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the cinema was a massive thing, wasn't it? It was a massive thing. People would go to the cinema all the time. Lots of the big films, everyone would go to see it at the cinema. Even when we were kids, it was almost the case. So we've moved a long way from that. Like going in Britain anyway. It was like a lot of the time you'd go out and you'd go to the flicks. We called it the flicks. It was definitely a staple of what people would do with their evenings.
Well,
And we just don't live in that world anymore, and we're moving further and further away from it, I think.
now, would you say that's because of the quality of the product, the interest in the product, the or something else? Is it because right now in the States, and I'm certain you're having similar financial hardships in the UK, our economy is like we're back to the Carter era now. We've got inflation so high, we've got joblessness climbing up. We have supposedly there's all these jobs available, but nobody's getting them. So we have stagflation. Plus our energy costs are out over the moon, which also happened in the Carter years. So as a comparison to your monthly, income, everything is 40% more than it was 3-4 years ago, if not more. So you have all these factors playing against Hollywood, but as you pointed out, they're not making a product that has any appeal. And the primary audience for cinema is adult males or teenage males. I mean, in the case of action movies and things like that. So they're not making anything that appeals. So, and I flipped back over to Mr. Nolte's article here. It says the woke Puritans had taken the fun out of everything. Sex sells, dummies, which you pointed out, and that works both ways. There's a reason the ladies dig Mel Gibson. It's true. He's a silver fox to ladies. But imagine the following: if Mad Max was set 40 years after Thunderdome, and a grizzled and aging Mel Gibson was in the title role. Max is now in his 60s. He lives a solitary but relatively comfortable life in the wasteland. And he's got a self-sustaining compound. And looking after himself has paid off. And you see all of this in his suggestions of, how he kind of brings somebody else in to teach them how to be successful in the wasteland. So he makes all these suggestions. But I'm not even sure that this would sell because I believe, and this is what the whole setup to the whole idea here, I believe the audience is just gone. And not just for the reason that you said that we're in a post-cinema world. I think you killed the habit because I think I used to go with friends to films all the time, right? I still go to movies because it's part of what I do here, but I wouldn't be driven to go to a cinema because it's going to show up in streaming forever. I think streaming ultimately killed off anything that anybody would be interested in. I don't know. I'm asking you, do you think the industry killed itself or what? I mean, is there something I'm missing?
No, I think it's a factor of all those things. So I put stress on a few of them. So first of all, the money thing. Yeah, our economy is really bad. It's funny because if you listen to the White House spokesman, they insist that Bidenomics is a complete success. If you listen to Janet Yellen, your Secretary of the Treasury, Janet the Felon Yellen, she's saying there's nothing to worry about. Wrong. And inflation isn't really a real thing. And just nonsense. Obviously, inflation is a real thing. Last time I went to the cinema in London, which was a couple of years ago now, I was sort of flabbergasted how expensive it was. There's a local one here in Swindon. It's actually not too bad. But in London, I bought a couple of tickets. some popcorn, a drink, and stuff. And it was like the best part of 60 quid,
Yeah.
£60.
Yep.
So that's knocking what, I don't know, $100 or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane, right? So there's that. It's just people haven't really got just free, just money, just endless money. But I think much more importantly than that, even more importantly than that, is that something you mentioned there, that they sort of killed the habit.
Yep.
So you must remember, even when we were young, it's probably different in America, a bit different anyway. But when I was young, there were only 4 or 5 channels on the television.
Oh yes, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And when there wasn't a large amount of new films that came out each year,
Right.
and ones that did, the actual product, if you like, was usually nearly always good, or at least worth something.
Right.
So, for example, I remember in like the mid 90s or early 1990s, there was some of the last sort of giant classic films, something like Jurassic Park 1, let's say.
Right.
Everyone went to go see Jurassic Park,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So the whole world went to the cinema to see Jurassic Park. Now, now going backwards in time, that would be much more the case. A lot of people went to see a lot of films because there wasn't that much choice. You honestly didn't have. It's weird to people like Zoomers now, or much younger people, hearing us say stuff like this. It's almost difficult to believe. There wasn't that much choice. So when the new big Hollywood blockbuster film came out and it starred Mel Gibson or Clint Eastwood or something, or Clark Gable or whatever, everyone would go and see it. Right now we live in a world where at the touch of your phone, or at home, or on your streaming service, you can see almost anything that was ever made, and very, very quickly, the newest thing that's just come out, you can just download that, see that, or you can at least get an illegal version of Pirate Bay or whatever. You've got everything you could ever want right there and then, right now.
Yeah.
So now, looking through that lens, going out to the cinema is just annoying. It's almost like we talked about when we went to the cinema when we were young. It was like an amazing day out, a real treat, a memory that will last for the rest of your life. You'll be an old man on your deathbed, and you'll still be able to recall the memory of that great cinema thing you had when you were 9 years old or something. So we just don't live in that world anymore. It's sort of it's annoying to have to go to the cinema. Do I really have to get up and go out and spend loads of money? Can't I just go click, 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 and I'll just watch it here now? So that whole paradigm is, we live in a different world, and I think it's a post-cinema world.
Look, you largely, I think you're correct. I think that the value's been stripped out of it, right? Because of the hassle, right, and because of the expense. And I think for a lot of people, unless it's an event film, they're not going anymore.
I mean, I personally, I've been to the cinema a fair bit recently. Well, not a fair bit. I've been to cinema, I think, 3 or 4 times in the last 3 or 4 months. Before that, I hadn't gone to the cinema in years.
Wow.
So I went to see June 2, and I very, very deliberately wanted to see that on the big screen because I'd seen June 1 not on the big screen and kicked myself. I said, I wish I'd seen that on the big screen. So when June 2 came out, I made an effort to go and see it on the big screen, and it was worth the effort. But that's going to be a rarity for me. There's going to be very, very, very few films that get made where I say to myself, I've got to make the physical effort to go to the cinema and pay a bit of money to make sure I see that in a cinema. Hollywood are going to come out with very few films where I feel like that.
Well, let me ask you one last question then related to that. Was Dune 2 worth seeing in the theater for you?
I thought so, yeah. It was one of the best films I've seen in a long time. I've got a long conversation with Nate, Mr. H, reviews on my channel. It's on his channel and my channel. We talked for quite a while about June 2 and June 1 and the original Frank Herbert novels. Right. For me, June 1 and June 2 are a couple of the best films that I've seen in a decade.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you that that's probably the best movie of the year so far. Although, have you seen Beekeeper yet?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, well, it's a wonderful Jason Statham vehicle. So you gave us something good, Jason Statham. So thank you. But anyway, I'm just teasing you. I've had a lot of fun today. Well, we're at the point in the show where we're going to wrap up. We're going to do a little bit of an outgoing thing here. So this is an opportunity for you, Beau, to promote yourself. I call it plug yourself. Here we go.
Okay. Well, two things then. First of all, the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If anyone out there has ever heard of Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, has been around on the internet for a fair while now, involved in Gamergate and all sorts of things. His his um his platform has got a bunch of us together, quite a few content creators, and there's a daily podcast of the Lotus Eaters where we talk a lot about politics and culture and all sorts of things. But on the website, lotuseaters.com, the website itself, there's a lot of paywalled content there. To become a subscriber there is £5 a month to get all the paywalled content there. But behind that paywall, there's content made by some pretty good people. One of our creators, Dan Tubb, is an expert in economics and has been a venture capitalist, so a tried and tested expert in all things financial and economic, and he makes lots of content about economics. We've got we got an in-house psychologist, Josh, got a postgraduate degree in psychology, made lots of content based around psychology. We've got a PhD, Stelios, who's an actual doctor in philosophy, and he's from Athens. He's an actual Athenian philosopher. And so there's lots. He's got some content all about philosophy there, and my good self, who's got an undergrad in classics and a postgrad in government and policy and politics, and I make content all about history. My series is called Epochs, and there's I'm up to like episode 161 or 162 or something, and there's all sorts on there. It's not just the ancient world. There's all sorts of things. Many. There's a giant series all about Napoleon, like an 8 or 9 part series about Napoleon, for example. I talk about various things from World War II, Operation Market Garden, the Battle of Kursk. I got things all about the medieval period. Many videos all about the medieval English monarchy. Lots of videos all about the ancient world, going back to ancient Assyria or Göbekli Tepe, the earliest human settlements. Lots of things about ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Lots and lots of things about ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So anyway, I could go on and on about epochs. At the moment, I'm just finishing up a series on the decline and fall of the Roman Republic, which is to say the generation or so before Julius Caesar. Some very important figures, Roman generals called Marius and Sulla, who started the civil wars that ended with Caesar and his adopted grandnephew Augustus. So 4-part series there at the moment, going up all about the decline and fall of the Roman Republic. So that's lotuseaters.com. Then there's my channel, just History Bro, and on there's a couple of hundred videos, so totaling many hours of content on there. Got all sorts of things. There's like an 18-part series all about Mao, the Great Leap Forward, and Chairman Mao and China through the 50s and 60s. Got a series all about Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. Again, a lot of material all about the ancient world. All sorts of things on there. Some very long conversations all about Alexander the Great or Hannibal, who led a Carthaginian army, including elephants, across the Alps to nearly destroy the Romans. All sorts of stuff on there. And the last video on there, I had a long conversation with Shadiversity. Shad M. Brooks, if anyone knows him, he's got a great channel himself, got a very big following. He does a lot of history-themed content, quite often about weapons, sort of ancient and medieval weapons. But he also loves castles, just the topic of castles. And now I love that. Being a history nerd, I love castles. Anyway, I had like an hour and a half, or is it closer to a 2-hour conversation with Shad, all about our favourite castles. So anyway, that gives you a flavour, an idea of History Bro. If that's the sort of thing you're interested in, please do head over there. like and subscribe. There's no paywall there. That's all completely free. So again, History Bro. And if you have got £5 a month to spare, consider joining us at the lotuseaters.com. If not, there is still a fair bit of unpaywalled content. So there you go.
Indeed. In fact, I can't say enough positive about the website. So do check that out. Podcast Lotus Eaters. It's incredible. It'll be in the description if you just look down. Or I guess it's over here now because YouTube changed their interface. But regardless, do check it out in the description. We've got lots to offer in there, including all of his socials, which he didn't plug very well at all. So do check out he's on Twitter. He's making quite a fool of the people on Twitter. I love that. And yeah, other than that, do check out everything he has to offer. And, of course, check out my site, beachpunk.us. And very soon, CultureCasino will be coming with not only my own individual content, but another bunch of merchandise. And eventually, you'll be able to get all of your hair, body, and beard products there that are actually my products. So we're coming up with that in the very near future. I want to say thank you to Beau for being here. It was amazing. Every moment was glorious. You delivered as expected, and I'm going to have you back. Maybe not on one of these, but maybe I can get you to talk a little bit about pop culture, entertainment, Disney. There's a lot of dismal Disney out there. You guys have your own bit of dismal. Maybe we'll talk about some of that.
No, thank you for having me, Culture. I really appreciate it. Really do.
Indeed. So, guys, do check him out. I really appreciate it. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to say, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya.
Press our buttons. Be seated at this time. We're landing in about 1 minute. Thank you.
Why, hello there, random citizen.
Oh, hey there, little buddy. How's it going?
Have you subscribed to CultureCasino yet?
Well, no.
Friggin'
Oh!
These guys, I tell ya.
Oh!
Dang it, I missed. Why won't these guys just subscribe already?
That hurt.